Would you step inside a place where dozens of men burned alive, where the walls themselves seemed to breathe with their screams? What if I told you, in the heart of Birmingham, Alabama, stands a factory so cursed that even decades after it shut down, people still hear the cries of men who should have been dead a century ago? This is the horror story of Sloss Furnaces, a place where iron was forged in fire, and men were swallowed by it. Factories are supposed to represent progress. The Industrial Revolution promised jobs, growth, and hope for families. But Sloss Furnaces wasn't just a workplace. It was a machine that devoured men alive. Imagine this. You're a poor immigrant in the late 1800s, desperate for money. You take a job at Sloss. You step into the belly of a massive iron furnace where temperatures reach up to 120 degrees at night, and the air is so thick with coal dust you can barely breathe. Your boss doesn't care if you survive. You're replaceable. If you collapse, if you fall, if you scream, it doesn't matter. The furnaces must keep burning. And that's exactly what happened. Dozens of men, some say hundreds, died in horrific, mysterious ways inside these furnaces, crushed, burned, swallowed by molten iron. But here's the real problem. The deaths didn't stop after the factory closed. To this day, workers, guards, and paranormal investigators claim they've seen shadowy figures lurking in the smokestacks. They've heard disembodied voices calling for help. They've felt searing heat when the furnaces haven't burned in over 50 years. Sloss didn't just make iron. It made ghosts. Picture Birmingham in the 1880s, known as the Magic City because of its booming iron industry. Skyscrapers of steel rising from the ground. The furnaces roaring night and day. Smoke blackening the sky. And in the middle of it all, Sloss Furnaces. It wasn't just a factory. It was a monster. A sprawling industrial complex with towering smokestacks, labyrinthine tunnels, and pits of molten metal that looked like rivers of hell itself. Men worked 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer. They inhaled toxic fumes. Their skin blistered from the heat. Many of them were immigrants or African-American laborers, treated as disposable. Accidents were so common that people in Birmingham started calling the place the slaughterhouse. And yet, the furnaces kept running. Why? Because iron built cities. Iron made fortunes. And Sloss was one of the biggest producers in the South. But here's where the story twists into horror. Because the deaths at Sloss weren't just accidents. Some say they were sacrifices. One name haunts the history of Sloss more than any other. James Slag Wormwood. He was a foreman during the early 1900s, notorious for pushing workers to the brink. He forced men to work on catwalks, slick with grease. He made them shovel coal into blazing furnaces until their bodies gave out. And when they begged for rest, he laughed. He whipped them with words like fire. Faster, hotter, harder. Under his watch, more men died than in any other period at Sloss. Some fell into molten iron. Some suffocated in the tunnels. Some simply collapsed, never to rise again. The men hated him. They whispered that the furnaces themselves demanded blood, and Slag was more than happy to feed them. Until one day, in 1906, the men got their revenge. Or so the legend says. Slag was pushed from the top of a furnace tower. He plummeted into the fire he once commanded. His body burned so quickly, there was almost nothing left. But his spirit? That never left. Workers claimed that even after his death, they could hear Slag barking orders in the dead of night. They swore they saw his figure, charred, twisted, glowing red, still prowling the catwalks. And that's when the real nightmare of Sloss Furnaces began. So here's the problem, my friend. Sloss Furnaces didn't just kill men. It trapped them. Their screams are said to echo in the iron walls, their shadows burned into the very brick. And if you dare step inside today, you may hear those same voices calling to you. But the most terrifying thing? What people have seen there in the decades since the fires went cold. And that's exactly what we're about to uncover. Here's the truth most people don't realize. Every abandoned factory has a story. Rust, decay, maybe a few accidents. But Sloss is different. Because the horror of Sloss isn't just history written in old newspapers. It's alive. The screams, the shadows, the feeling of being watched. They've been reported for over 100 years. And the strange thing? The stories are always the same, whether it's 1906 or 2006. That's the aha moment. Sloss isn't just a factory. It's a time capsule of suffering. A place where trauma didn't die with the men. It stayed behind, echoing in the metal, in the brick, in the ground itself. And that's why today, it's considered one of the most haunted places in America. To understand why this place is so haunted, you have to picture what it was like to work here. Imagine standing in front of a furnace, roaring at over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The air so hot, it burns your throat with every breath. Coal dust clings to your skin, blackening your lungs. There are no safety rails, no protective gear, just you, your sweat, and molten iron that can swallow you whole in an instant. Men fainted from heat exhaustion and toppled into the flames. Gas leaks poisoned workers, leaving them choking on the ground. Explosions ripped through the tunnels, turning men into shadows burned onto walls. And the company? They didn't care. They had one rule. The furnaces must keep burning, even if it meant feeding the fire with human lives. One story tells of a worker named Thomas who slipped while carrying molten iron. The metal splashed across the floor like liquid fire, burning through his boots, melting flesh from bone. The screams carried across the factory, but the foreman ordered the other men to keep working. Another man, Elijah, suffocated in one of the underground tunnels. His body wasn't found for days. By then, the heat had warped the metal around him. His fellow workers swore they could still hear him gasping for air long after he was gone. Accidents like these weren't rare. They were routine. And that's why many believe the furnaces demanded more than iron. They demanded blood. But the most infamous name tied to Sloss is James Slag Wormwood. Slag wasn't just a cruel foreman. He was a monster in human form. He worked men like animals, forcing them into dangerous jobs high above the furnaces where one slip meant death. It's said that under his rule, nearly 50 men died in just a few years. Some burned, some crushed, some simply disappeared into the fiery pits. Workers hated him. They whispered that Slag wasn't just reckless. He was offering sacrifices. That somehow, the furnaces gave him power the more men they consumed. And then came 1906. Late one night, Slag stood on a high platform above the main furnace. No one knows exactly what happened, but witnesses claimed they saw him stumble, scream, and fall into the roaring fire below. The heat was so intense that his body was incinerated instantly. No bones, no ashes, just gone. Most people would call that justice, but for the men who kept working there, it was only the beginning. Because after Slag's death, strange things started happening. Workers reported hearing his voice, barking orders at them from the shadows. Some saw a charred figure, glowing faintly red, stalking the catwalks. Others felt hands shove them while they were working, though no one was behind them. And the accidents didn't stop. Men continued to die, almost as if Slag was still there, pushing them into the flames. To this day, visitors swear they hear him. Some say they've even been shoved, scratched, or screamed at by a disembodied voice telling them to get back to work. Slag may have died in 1906, but his ghost still runs the furnaces. So, here's where it gets chilling. Sloss Furnaces shut down in 1971. The fires went cold. The machines stopped. The buildings began to rust. But the voices, the screams, the shadows, they never left. And in the decades since, security guards, tourists, and even seasoned paranormal investigators have reported terrifying encounters inside those crumbling walls. In the next part, we'll dive into the most disturbing eyewitness accounts. Stories so horrifying, they'll make you think twice before ever stepping foot inside Birmingham's most cursed landmark. And trust me, it only gets darker from here.